Well, last Sunday, our church council moderator, Pete Mueller, and I, we attended a UCC association meeting up at the Newaygo UCC. And part of that meeting was an ecclesiastical council for a woman named Bethany, who is seeking ordination in the UCC. Now, many of you were at my ecclesiastical council a few years ago when I became ordained in the UCC. At an ecclesiastical council, the person seeking ordination is asked a series of challenging questions. And last Sunday, one of the questions that Bethany was asked was how she brings her progressive Christian theology to her work as a hospice chaplain in Grand Rapids. So, for example, she was asked, what if the person you were ministering to talked about God being an old man with a long gray beard up in the clouds who was judgmental? Or what if the person talked about the need to be saved? Or what if they said the devil had horns and a pitchfork? Or what if they thought heaven was a place up in the clouds and they spoke about wanting to meet St. Peter at the pearly gates? Bethany said that for her, to bring her progressive Christian theology to that person in that moment would be harmful, and she said it would also be violent. That's the word that she used. And I agree with that at that time in a person's spiritual journey, it is not the role of a minister to challenge their theology or to expand their concept of God. It's a time to comfort someone, not challenge them. Now, my role as a church pastor is very different. My job is not to make you feel good every single Sunday. It isn't. My job is to challenge you. I am here to awaken you. I'm here to have you look at Scripture in a new light, to expand your thinking. So I am here to challenge you, but it is never my intention to upset you. And there were a handful of people who came to me after our Easter service who were upset. Now, we had 175 people at our Easter service, and only 4 people came to me. So it's a minuscule number, but I'm so grateful for those 4 people. And I really appreciated that they came to me with their feedback. That truly makes me a better pastor. So these 4 people were coming from 2 very different perspectives. 2 of the people were very upset at the Easter choir's opening song, which they felt was very evangelical. The song was "He is Alive," and they said that didn't align with our progressive Christian thinking. The other 2 people were at the other end of the spectrum. They were upset that I questioned the physical resurrection of Jesus in my Easter homily. Now, one of the challenges for me as a pastor of this church is that we come from so many different spiritual perspectives. There are people in this room who are conservative Christians. You take the Bible literally. There are other people who are at the far other end of the spectrum. What I love about the United Church of Christ is we're different from other denominations. We say no matter who you are or where you are on life's journey, you're welcome here. And in our Douglas UCC mission statement, which is printed in the bulletin every week, we say we honor and respect all belief and faith traditions. So I never want anybody here to feel that their beliefs are being disrespected or not being honored. I am here each week not to upset you, but to challenge you. And what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to help you to grow spiritually. Because oftentimes the things that are the greatest stumbling blocks to us on the spiritual path are those things that we don't question, those things that we just unknowingly take on, religious conditioning, things that we just learned as kids, we never really questioned, we just took them on. And oftentimes that limited thinking is a block to us on the spiritual path. So for example, In today's reading, which Nancy read for us from Acts, Peter raised Tabitha from the dead. Some of you take that story literally. You think that Peter really took a dead woman and made her come back to life. And I'm not telling you you're wrong. I'm not disrespecting your belief. What I'm asking you to do is, can you expand your thinking? And can you look at that story a different way? Can you see it symbolically or metaphysically? And then there are those of you who don't believe at all in any supernatural miracles. I also want to challenge your notions too, because none of us know for sure. You know, I tell you quite often, I don't have the answers. I don't. We're here to live the questions together. That's why it's called faith. So today, for Mother's Day, I want to talk about God as the mother. And there are people in this room who are saying, Pastor Sal, you're wrong. God is not a mother. Read the Bible. In the Bible, God is referred to as a male. It says he, him, his. Jesus himself, in our reading today, referred to God as the Father. So you're wrong, Pastor Sal. Okay. It is true. In the Bible, we do hear God referred to as a man. But for today, can I challenge you to expand your thinking and your concept of God? Our beautiful banner was created by an artist up at Spring Lake. His name is Phil Magnan. He gifted this beautiful banner to our church. And it says, all people in the image of God. And we know in Scripture, it says that all of us were created in the very image and likeness of God. So if that's true, God must be both male and female, right? I mean, if the females here were created in the very image and likeness of God, then God must be female too. I love that this church, they've been doing it for years. I remember when I first visited here years ago, before I was the pastor, when we say the Lord's Prayer, we say, Our Mother, Father, who art in heaven. And I love that. And I have to tell you that when I began to pray to God as mother, my relationship with God deepened. So I want to challenge you today to look at God as mother, but it's hard for us because we were so conditioned growing up as kids in the church that God was a man, God was the father. So how do we make sense of that? I mean, how do we say, well, Jesus referred to God as the Father. Jesus never referred to God as the mother. What do we do with that? Well, let's think about it. The Bible was written by men, and it was written by ancient men. They lived at a time where they believed the world was flat. They believed in slavery. They believed that disease was caused by sin. They believed that women were unclean. They believed women could be stoned. They believed that women were the property of men and that women were inferior to men. So how could they possibly have envisioned God as a female? They couldn't have thought that way, knowing what they knew about women and knowing how they viewed women. It would have been impossible for them to envision the Almighty as a woman. And so these men who wrote the Bible, and even Jesus in the time that he lived, could only view the Almighty as male. And not only was God male, God was the most powerful and almighty of men. So he was Lord, Master, and King. Now, I don't know about you, I can't get close to Lord, Master, and King. That person is so far removed from me. That concept of God is someone that I have to tremble in front of in fear. That's someone who's judging me, someone who lives far off on a throne. How can I pray to somebody like that? How can I get close and intimate with someone like that? The Christian mystics knew very differently. The Christian mystics were people who experienced intimacy with God. And we heard from one of them in our words of integration and guidance this morning, Julian of Norwich, who said, "As truly as God is our Father, so truly is God our Mother." She said that in the 13th century, so you can see why the church silenced her. But Julian and the other Christian mystics of the time, they saw God as female. Even Jesus, by the mystics, was referred to with feminine pronouns, which I know is confusing because Jesus was biologically male. But what the mystics were trying to explain by saying that Jesus was a mother was to talk about his feminine qualities, his nurturing, his compassion, his gentleness. If you were with us a few Sundays ago, you remember our reading was the one where Jesus himself referred to himself as a mother hen longing to gather her chicks under its wings. That's how Jesus described himself, as a mother hen. Now, again, there are those people who will say, God isn't a female. God is a male. And again, I'm not disrespecting your beliefs. I'm just trying to have you expand your beliefs and your concept of God. I think the image of God as mother is so beautiful. And I honestly think our world would be a very different place if all of us grew up in church seeing God as mother. Not as some angry, judgmental, authoritative old man that was writing down all our mistakes and was going to punish us, but as a loving, compassionate, gentle mother who longed to hold us in her arms, who was always there for us. I think our world would be a very different place if we grew up with that image. But here's the truth. God isn't a woman, and God isn't a man, because God isn't a person. God isn't a person. Now, I know we want to personify God because it's hard for us to pray to a force or a vibration or an energy. So we want to put it in human form. But God is not a person. And therefore, God really is genderless. Now, I've shared with you before, gender is a social construct that was created by humans, not by God. Yes, we are all born with certain genitalia, but then based on that, we are socially conditioned in how we should dress, how we should act, how we should behave. That's gender. And there are only two categories that society has said you can fit into. But there are people today who define their gender as non-binary. Binary means categorized into two. And there are people today who don't fit into either one of those categories. They don't identify as fully male, and they don't identify as fully female. They're non-binary. Now, you remember last year I wore this button, and I shared it with all of you. I went to a UCC meeting last year, and at the name tag table, there were all these buttons. Some said he, him, his. Others said she, her, hers. And the third one said they, their, theirs. And we were asked to wear the button for the gender identity or the pronoun that we would like to be called. So our non-binary friends prefer the pronouns they, them, theirs. And it's not hard. If Jay is non-binary and someone asks you where Jay lives, you say they live in Saugatuck. It's not that difficult. The UCC is selling these buttons on their website because they want us to raise awareness of gender inclusivity. And when you go on the website to order the buttons, it explains it this way. Gender is fluid, so it's never okay to assume someone's gender. Doing so can be harmful, hurtful, and demoralizing. Everyone has a right to choose how she, he, or they would like to be identified and which pronouns they prefer to use. These pronoun buttons are a great way to raise awareness about gender inclusivity and to show support for those who have been victims of misgendering. Wear these buttons and carry extras with you wherever you go. And please always remember to ask before assuming someone's gender. This simple act is one step toward a just world for all. That's what our church is about. I'm so proud of our denomination. We have always been at the forefront of inclusivity, of always drawing the circle wider and wider, which we sang about today in our introit, including more and more people to the table. So for us to really say that this is our church's mission and that we are an open and affirming church, this is our next frontier, if you will. And it's going to be hard for us, even in the UCC, because many of our church groups are gender specific. Churches have men's Bible studies and women's book groups. And those groups can be problematic to our non-binary and transgender friends who may feel excluded from those two choices. So what about just one Bible study or one book group for all people? Paul, in his letter to the early Christians in Galatians, says, "There is no longer male or female. You are all one." That oneness is God. God is beyond gender. Jesus understood God that way. Now, in Greek, it says that Jesus called God Abba, which means father. It more accurately means daddy or papa. Jesus was trying to say that it wasn't some almighty person to be feared, but was just a gentle, loving parent. But actually, we know Jesus didn't speak Greek. Jesus spoke Aramaic. And Aramaic scholars have said that the word was not Abba. The word Jesus used in Aramaic was Abun. And Abun means birther of the cosmos. Birther of the cosmos. That's how Jesus understood God. And so in today's reading, when he says the Father and I are one, he's saying I am one with all that is, the birther of the cosmos. Now, all of you, regardless of whether you're conservative or progressive, have an image of God. And I'm going to ask you today on Mother's Day to think of God as a she. God isn't a she. God maybe is more of a they than a he or a she. But today I want you to consider God as that birther, as the giver of all of life, as the divine mother, as the divine feminine that lives in all of us. Now, a very popular Christian book and movie a few years ago was called The Shack. And so many Christians love The Shack. I know conservative Christians who love The Shack and progressive Christians who love The Shack. In The Shack, if you remember, God is portrayed by a black woman, and her name is Papa. And in the book and the movie, Papa says this: I am neither male nor female, even though both genders are derived from my nature. If I choose to appear to you as a man or a woman, it's because I love you. For me to appear to you as a woman and suggest that you call me Papa is simply to mix metaphors, to help you keep from falling so easily back into your religious conditioning. That is my hope for you when I challenge you, is I don't want to upset you, but I don't want you to fall so easily back into your religious conditioning. I want you to break free of those things so that you can grow spiritually and expand your concept of God. So on this Mother's Day week, what I want to invite you to do is to find time each and every day to pray to God the Mother. Close your eyes when you pray and picture her in your mind's eye. That beautiful, loving, gentle mother that's cradling you in her arms. May you feel more deeply her motherly love. And may you come to understand what Julian of Norwich wrote, that as truly as God is our Father, so truly is God our Mother. Namaste.